All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Maintaining Balanced presentation, Tips for Balanced Recruitment. My name is Justin Settles. I am the project specialist for the Identification and Recruitment Consortium. I'm so glad that you all could join us this afternoon or morning, wherever you are. For recruiters to find all migrant students, they must cast as wide of a net as possible. It is important for recruiters to look at all possible avenues for identification and recruitment and to maintain balance in their efforts. During this presentation, we will look at the 4 key areas of identification and recruitment that recruiters should focus on and learn some tips to help ensure their Idnr efforts are always balanced. To begin with, I want to talk a little bit about how we measure success as recruiters. Successful identification and recruitment is about finding as much information as possible from as many different sources as you can. Oftentimes, as recruiters, we focus on things such as student count, number of COEs obtained, but the reality is we should measure our success based on the information that we obtain. The more information that we as recruiters have, the easier it is going to be able to work with agribusinesses in our area and to find those eligible students. And so we should always be trying to find information. And so when we talk about balanced recruitment, we're talking about how we can be as thorough as possible and find as much information as possible. So there are 4 key areas where recruiters can conduct identification and recruitment and obtain information. The first is in-school recruitment, working with schools. The second is through agribusinesses and farms. The third is by home visits, going door to door, visiting families where they live. And then the last one is community recruitment, which means working with local community agencies, working with other programs that are working in your area, as well as visiting sites in the community where migrant workers and families might often visit. And so each of those 4 key areas of identification and recruitment offer different benefits and different information to the recruiter. Each area is valuable and necessary for the recruiter to be able to have a complete picture of the area they have been assigned. If you just take one of those 4 areas away, your picture is not going to be complete and you won't be able to get the entire story about the area that you're working in. Recruiters can often find their strength in one of the 4 key areas that we talked about. But the problem is that when a recruiter finds their strength in that key area, they have a tendency to focus on their strongest areas at the expense of other areas. For example, a recruiter may have lots of success recruiting in homes and housing, going door to door, speaking to families with kids. But because they have so much success doing that, they oftentimes neglect to visit the farms in their area or the agribusinesses in their area. And so it's something that I see a lot of, where recruiters will find something that they really enjoy, they're really comfortable with, or they think that they're really good at, and they'll tend to do that a lot. But the problem is when they do that a lot, they can oftentimes leave several of the other key areas behind, and it can mean that they're ending up not finding as many students as they would otherwise. It's important that recruiters focus on all 4 of the key areas of identification and recruitment, and that you always include the 4 key areas in your Idnr planning. Like I said, if even one of the key areas is neglected, a recruiter may miss out on key information that could lead them to finding a new farm or potential students. So then what is balanced recruitment? Balanced recruitment means looking for leads and information in as many different places as possible, staying organized with your information, and ensuring that you are always focusing on all 4 of the key areas of Idnr. Balanced recruitment is a means of organizing and planning your identification and recruitment efforts so that you are always keeping in mind those 4 key areas of recruitment. As a recruiter makes their Idnr plan, they should always check and ask if their plan is balanced and includes all 4 of those key areas. So to begin with, we're going to go through each of the 4 key areas of recruitment and look and see what are some tips for helping improve our strategies in those areas. So we're going to begin with in-school recruitment. In-school recruitment often means using work/home language surveys as well as all other resources available in the school system to help the recruiter locate potentially eligible students enrolled in the schools. And so a lot of schools have language surveys that they send out to families. Maybe the surveys are filled out at the time of enrollment or when students are new, and they're sent out to families and try to gather, what language is spoken in the home, where the family works, what is their history. You might also hear them as occupational surveys as well. Sometimes, they include move history. And so these surveys are great tools for getting information that could lead you to identifying potential families. And so if your school district doesn't have those, then you want to work to try to make sure, talk to somebody, the superintendent, to see what you can do to get those implemented in your school district. Some recruiters may already work within the schools or be teachers themselves. However, it's important to know that the level of awareness of the migrant education program in schools can vary from state to state or even region to region. It's important for recruiters to not assume that just because it is a school, they automatically know what the migrant education program is. Recruiters have to be able to raise awareness for the program within the school system and to build up the relationship with the schools and the educators to be able to conduct that recruitment in the schools. To begin recruiting in schools, look for who are the key educators in your area that may have contact with potentially eligible students. To begin with, you should always look for who is the Title I director for the school district. The Title I director oversees the Title I programs in the school district and all Title I funds. The migrant education program runs and operates under Title I as part of Title I Part C. And so the Title I director in your school district is going to be the person that is going to be most familiar with the migrant education program and the one that's going to be able to open up doors for you. And so you want to reach out to the Title I director, do your research to find out who it is, and try to set up a meeting with them. Send them an email, give them a phone call ahead of time to see if there's a good time for them to be able to meet. Similarly, reach out to the superintendent who oversees the school district. Having a good relationship with the superintendent can open doors to multiple schools and multiple opportunities. Check to see if the superintendents and principals are even aware of the migrant education program and what you can do to raise awareness of the program. Maybe your school district has a migrant liaison. Some school districts have a person that works directly with migrant families on behalf of the school district. So check to see if they have a migrant liaison that you can reach out to, and check to see if the school district does send out those work or occupational surveys to homes. And if they do, work with the schools, talk to the Title I director to see what you can do in order to try to get that information and try to get those surveys so you can visit up with the families. When working with the schools, always make sure to have some sort of letter from the state giving permission for the recruiter to ask for information related to the migrant education program. Having a letter authenticating who you are, giving you permission and authority to be there is really, really important. If you do not have a letter from the state, work with your supervisor to be able to obtain one. These letters are especially important with FERPA and FERPA rules and laws. We want to make sure that we are maintaining, the privacy of student information at all times. And so having that letter, lets the school know that it's okay for them to be sharing information with you. As I've said, you want to make sure as well, we just talked about FERPA and how important it is for privacy reasons. And so you want to make sure that you're studying up on FERPA laws and that you're aware of FERPA laws. So you know the regulations required for sharing information and keeping information private. Student information and the security of the information should always be of most importance. And so you can actually read up on FERPA at the OME website, the results.ed.gov website that we saw yesterday during our opening session, or you can read up on it on other federal program websites. And so I just shared in chat a link straight to the FERPA regulations and guidelines. It says error page not found. Well, if you go to results.ed.gov, which I'll share in chat as well, and then you click on the legislation and policy page. This will take you to the legislation related to the migrant education program. And you can scroll down. You can see here where it says Family Education and Privacy Act, or FERPA. And so if you click that, it looks like the website is down right now. It was up yesterday, but if you go look at it later, I'm sure it'll be restored. So when you're wanting to recruit in schools, as I mentioned, you want to reach out to those Title I directors, those directors that are overseeing the Title I funds in your school district. Reach out to them to see if you can set up a meeting so you can introduce yourself, since they are the ones that are most familiar with the migrant education program. Ask the Title I directors about school mobility data and which schools see the most movement. And so Title I directors are going to be able to know the information related to which schools have the most students coming in and out. Knowing that data, knowing the school mobility data can really help you know where to focus on in the region. And so if you know that there's one school that has a lot of students coming in and out, more than any of the other schools, you want to focus on the area around that school to possibly look for migrant housing where migrant workers might be living in, since people are kind of coming and going from that area. Once you build up that relationship with the schools and school district, working specifically with the superintendent, working specifically with the Title I director, as I had mentioned, over time, as you build up that relationship, you can work with them to see if you can attend school events, to meet families, and to raise awareness for the migrant education program. It's really important that when we're talking about these kind of events, that you don't just show up for them, that you have permission to be there, which is why building up that relationship with the Title I director and the superintendent is so important. And so you want to work with this Title I director and the superintendent to be able to attend these kind of events. And if you are able to go, always bring business cards and flyers to hand out so that you can advertise the migrant education program, and to be able to, talk to families so that they can see the benefit of the program. If you have brochures that talk about the services that are offered, you can hand them out so that they have something to take home to remember the program by. Hang any posters you might have advertising the migrant education program in the classrooms of teachers who regularly encounter eligible students, or in other high traffic areas in the schools so that parents will be able to view them. So for example, you can hang posters in offices, in the school offices. Maybe you can ask the Title I director to hang a poster in their office as well. If the school district has a migrant liaison, you can have a poster in their office too, so that anybody that comes in might be able to leave flyers that parents can take home in the school's office. You can leave brochures, you can leave business cards, or even you can leave them with teachers in the classrooms themselves. And so flyers and brochures are a great tool for families to have the opportunity to read about the program at their own pace, as well as to have something they can take home to remember the program by. I also want to bring up one of the key aspects of being able to conduct recruitment in schools is also working with the Mckinney-Vento /homeless program. Many migrant students are also eligible for the Mckinney-Vento program, and some students already enrolled in the Mckinney-Vento program might also be eligible for the migrant education program. And so for us as recruiters, people working with migrant students, it's important for us to be able to read up on the Mckinney-Vento program, to know exactly what it is, what makes a student eligible for the Mckinney-Vento program, so that we can know, so that we can let the school districts know they qualify for it as well. The Mckinney-Vento program, for those that are unfamiliar with it, is a federal program under Title IX that guarantees services for students who fall under the definition of homeless. And so homeless doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have a home. Homeless can, a student may qualify for homeless if there's more than one family living in a home. A student can qualify for homeless if the home is found to be inadequate in some way, shape, or form. There's a lot of ways that a student can be found to meet the definition of homeless. And so it's why we encourage everybody to read up on the Mckinney-Vento program, read up on the definitions of the Mckinney-Vento program and how students can qualify for the Mckinney-Vento program, so that you can know about it, so you can properly identify the students that are available for those resources. I think it's also important to remember that not all students who are eligible for the migrant education program are enrolled in school. Make sure that you're not only focusing on in-school recruitment so you don't miss any students. We know a lot of recruiters that, when they do recruitment, they only recruit through the school system. They only recruit using those occupational surveys. They only recruit as students are enrolled in the program. But the problem is if you do that, you could miss out on a lot of students who aren't there in the schools. You may have some students that are coming to your area that are there only during the summer months when the harvest season is happening. And after that is done, they leave and go to another area. So they never enrolled in school. You also may have a lot of OSY or pre-K students in your area that could also qualify for the migrant education program. And so this is why balanced recruitment especially is so important. It's a good example to show that just because you're really good in one area doesn't mean you should focus only on that area, because you can miss out on so much. And so we encourage everybody to meet the Title I directors, meet those superintendents, build up those relationships, recruit within the schools, get those occupational surveys, but then expand and make sure you're being balanced in your efforts and looking at the farms, agribusinesses, housing sites, and community sites as well, so that you can get the full picture and meet all students who do qualify. So now that we talked about schools, let's talk a little bit more about recruiting in agribusinesses and farms. It's important for recruiters to have close relationships with the farms and agribusinesses in their area. One of the easiest ways to locate potentially eligible students is to find the migratory agricultural workers where they're working. If you find somebody working on a farm, you already know that they are engaging in a qualifying activity and could potentially be a migratory agricultural worker. You don't have to worry about trying to find out their work history. And so it's a great way of meeting families that could qualify for the program. And so you have to be able to have these relationships with the farms, with the agribusinesses in your area, so that you can meet those workers. Additionally, as a recruiter, it's really critical for us to know the information about the farms in our areas, so we can make sure that we're staying on top of, the patterns and figuring out what's happening. Even knowing about the agriculture in our area really helps with planning. And so being able to have these relationships with the farms where you can get that information is going to make your work easier, because you're going to be able to know, okay, if you have the relationship with the farm can tell you when they're going to begin planting, when they're going to begin harvesting, even when they're going to start hiring people, so that you can plan ahead. And so we must be familiar with the farms in our areas. Having close relationships, like I said, makes it easier to locate students when they arrive and can provide valuable information to help plan for the future. Farms and agribusiness can inform you of when crops are in season, when new workers are hired, when the seasons are over, and when workers may leave. They can also let you know when things, are going really well for them. So they might be hiring more people. So you might see an influx of students. And, similarly, they can let you know when things are not going as well. So if there's maybe a drought or flooding that prevents them from being able to plant all of their crops, they can let you know, so you can know to expect, maybe fewer students this year. So having this relationships with the farmers so you can get this information can be really critical for helping you to make sure you have success in the long term. You want to make sure that you're visiting both seasonal and temporary work, as well as trying to look to find, that you're visiting agricultural work and looking to see if there's any fishing work in your area. One of the things that we at IDRC have been advocating over the last month and a half or so is for states to look and do more research into the fishing industry in their areas. We recently highlighted, we have a new agricultural trends page on the IDRC website, which I can show you all right now. That's about the fishing industry. So if you go to the IDRC website, idr/consortium.net, you can click on the What's New page, and that'll show you all the latest projects the IDRC consortium is working on. And at the very top here, you see where it says Ag Focus Fisheries page. You can click on that to learn a lot more about the fishing industries happening around the country. The fishing industry on the coast, there's more than 2 million workers that are working in the fishing industry, which is comparable to the total number of workers working in farms all across the United States. So it's a huge industry that we're missing out on. And so, for us as the migrant education program, we want to make sure that we're being balanced and looking in all possible areas. So we want to be looking for agricultural workers that might qualify, fishing workers that might qualify, as well as seasonal and temporary work. I found that it's often really easy for recruiters to solely focus on one type of qualifying work in their area. So you'll have recruiters that maybe they'll recruit almost exclusively temporary workers, going to those temporary work locations, those processing plants, those dairy farms, working with them, and leaving all the seasonal stuff out of it. Or you might have recruiters that are focusing solely on the seasonal work and only recruiting seasonally. And so you have to be able to be balanced and look for both seasonal and temporary work so that you're not missing out on any students. For many new recruiters, farms and agribusiness owners can be intimidating because they are not used to speaking to them. You know, I hear a lot of recruiters mention to me that they're nervous about speaking to farm owners. And, you know, the reality is that there's nothing to be nervous about. You know, yes, farm and agribusiness owners can be protective of their business. We have to remember that a lot of times, you know, a farmer's land might have been in his family for generations. You know, maybe it belonged to their great-great-grandparents as well. And so we have to respect that. We have to respect how protective they are. We also have to respect the fact that oftentimes they're really, really busy. But no matter what, a lot of farms and agribusiness owners often care deeply about their workers. Some of them even treat them like family that have been around for a long time, and they care about the work that is being done. And more importantly, maybe they're open to teaching recruiters who come into it with an open mind. Farmers love talking about the work that they do. They love talking about themselves. You know, they love talking about the work they do. They love talking about their farms. And so always ask questions, go into it with an open mind so that you can learn. And even just asking those questions can really build up a lot of trust with the farmer. You know, don't be intimidated to speak to the farmers. Many farmers are willing to talk to recruiters if they are not busy. And so a lot of times, you know, if the farmer cannot speak to you in that moment, it's not because they're being rude. It's because, you know, they have a lot going on. And so ask them when a good time would be to come back to speak to the owner, to the manager, or even to the contractors. One of the things that I always encourage recruiters to do is to make sure that you're visiting farms both during peak season to talk to the workers as well as off season to talk to the farm owners. If you're visiting a farm during off season, the farmer isn't going to be as busy. They more than likely have a lot more time to be able to sit down, to talk to you, to have a long conversation, to really hear a lot more about the migrant education program, and to kind of develop that relationship. When you're out visiting a farm, you should always make it clear that you are not there to interrupt the business's work schedule. A lot of times, you know, one of the things that farmers are most worried about is the fact that they have so much to get done and they don't have a lot of time to do it. And so we want to make sure that we are respecting that time, respecting the business, you know, and know that if a farmer does seem hostile, it's probably because they have a lot of work that has to get done and they want to make sure that you're not taking away from that. So always make it clear and known and express that you are not there to interrupt work in any way, shape, or form. You want to think ahead of time about what the needs of the farmer might be and how the migrant education program can help them meet those needs. When you're talking to them, present the migrant education program to them in a way that they can see the benefits of their employees talking to you. So maybe if you know that a lot of farmers in the area are hiring non-English speaking workers, you can take English resources, you can take English materials and offer to say, hey, you know, I can provide these English materials to your workers. Maybe that'll help them be able to communicate better with you. Farmers might need some help translating things for training. And so, you know, you might be able to help them translate those things as long as it's not something too professional or related to like medical or health situations, because we don't want to be reliable for mistranslating anything. You know, maybe you can bring farmers resources and information about other events that are happening in the city, as well as, you know, other resources that might be out there that they didn't know about. Make sure you always have something though to offer that is both helpful and relevant to the farmer's needs. So you are going to know your communities, you're going to know the people that are working in your communities. And so that means you're going to also know their needs as well. And so just think ahead of time and plan it out and think about how specifically the migrant education program can meet those needs so that you can present it in a way to the farmer that is relevant, so that they can see the benefit. When you show up, you know, make sure that you try to find out when workers arrive at the farm or the plant, processing plant, or the agribusiness, as well as when the workers leave and when the workers go on break. This goes a long way to be able to respect the time that we talked about, you know, make sure that we're not interrupting any work. You got to realize it's easier to speak to the workers when they are on break or when they are getting ready to enter the job or leaving the job, than it is when they're actually out in the field. And so we want to make sure that we are speaking to them in a time that's not interrupting anything, where they're relaxed so we can talk to them. When you are able to speak to the workers, one of the things I always encourage recruiters to do is to make sure that you're getting addresses and phone numbers so you can properly follow up with them. Many workers, even if we're talking to them before they go to work, after they go to work, or while they're on break, might not have the time to have a full, complete eligibility interview at the farm. And so we want to make sure that we have a way of getting back in contact with them to be able to conduct that eligibility interview. And so I encourage recruiters to always get that contact information, get an address if you can, get a phone number if you can, so that you can follow up and have a full conversation at a later point when the worker is available. I will give you some advice as well. Oftentimes when you're out visiting farms and you're recruiting on farms, you're going to find yourself in situations where you need to speak to a large group of workers at once. So maybe you know that workers are going on break. And so you go in to talk to them, and there might be 30 people there that you need to speak to, but they're only on break for 30 minutes. And so how do you speak to a large group of people at once? And so I always tell recruiters, if they're speaking to large groups, number one, stand in a central location where everybody can see you and where everybody can hear you. Don't stand off to the side in a corner. Stand somewhere centralized where everybody can know to look at you and hear you, and make sure that you speak loudly. Oftentimes, one of the mistakes I've seen recruiters do is that they'll go to these large groups where they need to speak to them, need to recruit, and they'll be soft-spoken and they won't raise their voice. They'll be timid, but you have to command that situation. You have to demand the attention from the group, because if you don't, they're just going to ignore you and continue their conversations. So speak loudly and introduce yourself. Introduce the program, have an elevator pitch ready to go. If you have never created your elevator pitch or are not sure what an elevator pitch is, I recommend you go back and watching the session from yesterday on Every Second Counts, creating your elevator pitch, so you can learn more. But an elevator pitch is just a short 15 to 30 second speech to let you know, to introduce yourself, who you work for, and why you are there. And so as you're introducing yourself, try to ease everyone into the conversation with small talk. Asking the group how it's doing, how the work is going, are really great icebreakers to help get them to pay attention to you. You want to make sure that you're being respectful of their time. Let them know that you don't want to take up too much of their time as soon as you start talking to them. And then think about what the group's biggest need or interest might be, and cater your conversation and pitch to those needs. And so a lot of times farm workers are interested in learning English. So, you can bring English lessons or English books to really help get their attention. So if you're going into a break room where there's 30 workers there, have, like one of our IDRC's English in Minutes books that's available on the IDRC website. Have one of those with you that you can then hold up and say, hey, I work for the Migrant Education Program. I'm here to meet those that are working. One of the services we offered is, free English books for those that are eligible. And, and again, as long as you're presenting the program in such a way that is relevant to their needs, they're going to listen and they're going to pay attention to you. Bring materials that you can share to those large groups, because that'll oftentimes help get their attention and help them wanting to keep talking to you. The materials don't have to be anything big. Oftentimes it can be small things such as a pack of markers. Bandanas are huge. Bandanas go a long way of building up relationships with migratory workers. Notebooks also are really, really helpful. People want to use them to be able to write. All these things are small things that you can hand out on site in order to help get these large groups to pay attention to you. Or you can even use it kind of as a bargaining tool. You can be like, hey, I've brought some things that I want to share with the group, bandanas, markers, notebooks that I want to give to the group. But before we can hand these out, I need everybody to listen and pay attention to me. Use it that way as a bargaining chip to get them to focus on you, listen to what you have to say, and hopefully help. I know for me, with English books before, when I've had those large groups, one of the things that I've done is, you have a large group of 30 people, ages can range from those that qualify to OSY to older people. A lot of times it'll be the older people that really see the value in wanting to learn. when we're younger, a lot of times we're blinded by a lot of things in life, don't necessarily see the value and importance of education. But, when you're in those large groups, you can use those English books, for example, to try to get people to help you. So one of the things that I've done is I've gone, in those large groups and be like, hey, I'm here looking for the younger guys that might be working, that might be eligible, to receive classes. If anybody helps me find them, I'll give them an English book. And, and that's a way of getting somebody there that's part of the group, part of the community that you're acting with on your side and helping you and pointing you in the direction of those that might qualify. As you are talking to the large group, keep your eyes open, reading body language of everybody, look to see who's paying attention, as well as looking to see who might be the leaders of the group. You might notice people in the crowd kind of eyeing one person, or one person kind of standing, with their arms crossed in the middle or something. But you should easily be able to identify, who's the contractor, who's the leader of this group, who's the person that's most respected, and use that to your advantage. And so if you can get the buy-in from that leader, from the main person in the group, the person that oversees the group, the rest of the group will often follow. Or you can get the leader to work with you to reach the rest of the workers. Maybe you identify somebody that looks like they might be the leader of the group. Well, then you can take one of those English books and say, hey, I really need to get a hold of the younger guys that work here. Will you help me? If you do so, I'll give you this English book. And so once you are finished speaking to the large group as a whole, you can then try to speak individually to those you identified as paying the most attention, that might be the most interested, or to the leaders, or even if you were finally able to identify some people that looked like they were young enough, you could talk to them as well. One thing I want to point out and make it clear is that when you're talking to workers, you always want to make sure that you make promises you can keep. Never promise anything that you cannot follow through with. So many recruiters' relationships with farms, business owners, farm workers, even entire communities have been burnt because they make a ton of promises that they can never hold up. And so you want to make sure you're only making promises that you can actually follow through with. Migrant workers and their families can have long memories, real long memories. And if something happens where you disappoint them, they can carry that with them for a long time. And so when a recruiter doesn't follow up with something that's promised, it can really hurt the reputation. And sadly, that reputation can extend to other recruiters as well. Say you have another recruiter that comes back in 2 years, a family still might remember when a recruiter didn't follow up with something. Because of that, they might not want to be part of the program. And so you always want to make sure that you're only making promises that you know that you can keep. You should focus on recruiting in farms and agribusinesses during the entire year, not just like the peak season, as I said earlier. Many farms and business owners are busy during peak season, might not have the time to speak to the recruiter and develop, needed relationships. So visit during the off season when things aren't as busy to really have those long, meaningful conversations with the farmers and to be able to build up those relationships. You can also help build relationships with farms and agribusiness owners in your area by asking questions about their work, kind of like what I was mentioning earlier. Ask as many questions as you can to learn about the agricultural process on the farm and to demonstrate that you care about the farm and not just the farm workers. Knowing that information about the agricultural process will also go a long way in determining eligibility and filling out and completing the COE. For any time you go and visit any place, whether that be a school, a business, a home, or even a farm, make sure that you're bringing flyers, posters, brochures, business cards, anything that you can share with the workers, anything that you can share with the actual farm itself as well. Many businesses have locations where you can hang posters so that they're very visible. A lot of these locations include places like the bathrooms. We've had recruiters have a lot of success hanging flyers, by the bathrooms, as well as things like places like break rooms and changing rooms where you might be able to have posters, or even, the farm or agribusinesses office where you might be able to leave out business cards or brochures for people to take with them as they come and go. The IDRC electronic survey tool, for those that are unfamiliar with it, IDRC has created an online tool to allow anybody that has access to the link to submit a referral. And so all you have to do to be able to submit a referral is to go to idrreferrals.net and fill out the short, quick form, and an email will be sent after you fill it out straight to the recruiter who oversees the area where that referral is from. And so they know automatically when there is a new student that they need to check back with. And so, it's a great tool to really help us get out into our communities and extend our reach. All you need is the URL, idrreferrals.net, and you can begin, submitting referrals for families that you might encounter, as well as sharing the link to other families that you encounter in the field that might be able to fill out a referral as well. So now that we've talked about farms, recruiting in schools and recruiting in farms, it's now time to talk about, making in-home visits. A lot of great information can be attained by visiting houses where migrant workers and families commonly live. Many workers and families, you have to realize, will return to the same housing locations year after year because that's where they feel comfortable with. And so it's important to check on those housing locations and check on them regularly. People are going to be coming and going so that you can follow up. I've seen a lot of recruiters be like, oh, I visited that house, so I don't need to go back there for a long time. And that's not true. Sometimes you want to keep coming back every 2 months or so to check to see if anybody new has come in. When we're talking about housing locations can be a wide variety of things, including homes, trailers, trailer parks, mobile parks, apartment complexes, hotels, on-site housing at farms, even at campsites. I found recruiters who were camping before for a summer while they worked tomatoes. And so all of these things, can be different housing sites. And so when we're talking about balanced recruitment, you want to make sure that you're talking about all of them and not just one type of house. So when we're going through and we're reviewing, doing our housing recruiting, one of the things that you can do is to review the old addresses in your area. So review addresses of students who previously qualified in order to find potential housing locations. So I always encourage recruiters to try to get at least 5 years worth of data. So work with your data person at your state level or work with your supervisor to see how you can get 5 years worth of information about who was living in the area that you're working in. So when you have those old addresses, you can look and try to find patterns. Are there groups of places where people have lived regularly over the last 5 years? Are there any places where people might have used to live, but they're not living anymore that you can go and check? So old addresses can oftentimes really help you identify those areas of part of town where migrant families may be living that you might not be familiar with. When you're out visiting home locations, oftentimes you're going to be required to go door to door. You want to make sure that you are being as thorough as possible. Don't make any assumptions. Go door to door, knock on every door, try to speak to as many people as you can. I know for me, one time I found a migrant family that qualified, and they were staying in, in a huge, like multi-million-dollar mansion, but they had gotten a room in there because, a friend of a family, or because the father had previously done landscape work for the owner of the house. And so now the father was working on farms. And so never make assumptions about where you might or might not find a possibly eligible student, because you're going to find students in some surprising places sometimes. As you're out in the community, looking around at housing sites, trying to recruit at housing visits, going door to door, checking on every single door, you want to make sure that you keep your eyes open and look for possible clues that a migrant family might be living at the location that you're visiting at. Some possible clues include, possible clues include like out-of-state license plates. Oftentimes, when migrant families are moving in from out of state, they're going to have a license plate from another state. And so be on the lookout for those. Be on the lookout for agricultural equipment on the porch. So for example, when I used to work in Tennessee and we had tomatoes, you'd be able to go in the summertime and you'd be able to identify the workers that were working in the tomatoes because they had the bright red tomato buckets sitting on their porch. And so look for any type of agricultural equipment that you can find that might be related to local crops. Look for cars or work vans that have muddy tires, meaning they probably went out into the field. And you can also look for produce boxes on the porch. So look for like fresh produce that they might have been able to pick and gotten from the farm where they work at, as well as looking, for foreign groceries in the trash. So, I one time found a migrant family because I was out just kind of driving around. And as I was driving around, I passed a home that had a it was a rosca de reyes, so a cake for King's Day in the trash. And so I saw that. I saw, it was like, okay, there's obviously, a family here that celebrates El Dia de los Reyes, King's Days. So I went and talked to them, and it turned out to be a migrant family that had moved in to work on a local nursery. So when visiting a family or when going door to door, visiting housing sites, you always want to make sure that you have your identification or at least some form of identification with you. Make sure it is clear and clearly identifies who you are as well as who you work for. Bring any flyers, brochures, or business cards as well that you have to hang out. Door hangers are oftentimes great to be able to be used. Make sure you have all the materials that you need at once. And as you're going and visiting the houses, always ask the person that you were speaking to, as well if they know of any other housing sites or locations that you should visit, or any other places that you should be able to go to potentially find migrant students. Always ask as you're visiting a property who owns or rents out the property. If you are visiting an apartment complex, a hotel, or trailer park, there's more than likely going to be an office where management's at. So go to management and speak to the office there. Try to build up that relationship with them. A good relationship with property owners or management can oftentimes provide valuable information and let you know ahead of time when new families are arriving. I've made relationships in the past with apartment owners, and as soon as a worker moves in or somebody that the apartment owner thought might qualify for the program, they immediately called me to let me know. And so you can see, a lot of these relationships can develop into being able to get good, timely information. You can also use several websites to help locate low-income housing or housing with high mobility in your area. There's, for example, rent.com, which is a website that you can use to kind of identify, those houses where people have been coming and going a lot. You can also use rent.com to identify low-income housing. And then we have two websites here that both highlight trailer and mobile home parks around the country. And so again, you have a lot of workers that come in to these trailer and mobile home parks because they're more affordable and that's where they're living. But in order to find them, you have to know where these mobile home parks are. And so do the research ahead of time. Look at these three different websites: rent.com, the Mobile Home Village, as well as the Homeland Infrastructure Database. And it'll really help you to identify those housing locations that you need to go and visit. Now that we've talked about housing and recruiting in housing, it's time for us to transition and to talk about recruiting in our communities. Many community organizations are already working with migrant families or potentially eligible students. There's already a lot of organizations out there that are working with similar populations, and we should be looking for these organizations to partner with. Recruiters should work to locate the organizations working in their area that migrant families might encounter, and to look for the locations in the community where migrant families frequent. And so if you want more information about looking for organizations in your community, I encourage you all to go and watch the Exploring the Unknown presentation that was given earlier. It's going to be available to be viewed on Whova, as well as the IDRC website and YouTube page later on, as we go through a lot of different websites and resources to help you locate those organizations in your community that you can partner with. Again, when we're talking about communities and working within the community, recruiting in the community, the IDRC electronic survey tool is a fantastic tool to help partner with the community and get your voice out there, get the community giving you referrals. You should always be looking for referrals everywhere you go, no matter who you meet, because you never know who you're going to run into that knows a student who might qualify. Again, have those brochures, have those flyers, have those postcards ready. Put a link to the electronic survey tool on those materials and hand them out so that anybody that has those materials will see the link and know how to have access to the IDRC electronic survey tool. So the types of community organizations that you can look for in your area include health clinics and other kind of health organizations. Maybe there's women's health clinics and organizations that are also working in your area. Churches or religious centers. There's the National Farm Worker Ministry. That's a Christian focused ministry working all over the country to cater to farmers, as well as, we're seeing a lot of new workers coming over from African countries as well as the Middle East. So be respectful of their religion and culture, as well as trying to find that place where you feel a sense of peace too. Go and visit the adult education centers that are out there. So any adult learning centers that might offer classes, those are valuable resources, especially if they offer English classes to help get your migrant workers connected to those resources. Maybe you might find workers that are too old to qualify, but you can put them in contact with those adult education centers to help get them classes as well. There's the Head Start programs, more specifically the Migrant Head Start program. Look to see who runs the Migrant Head Start program in your state to build up that relationship with them, try to develop a formal relationship with them to help share information. There's going to be other nonprofits working in your area that are dealing with immigration rights that you can reach out to that might work with migrant workers and students. There's going to be nonprofits that are working with similar populations as well. There's some organizations maybe that focus on housing, for example, and helping low-income families with housing. So reach out, work with them. Food and clothing banks that are out there, as well as extension offices from the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the farm service agencies. It's a good idea too, when we're talking about recruiting out in the community, finding those partner organizations, you should know that your state might already have partnerships with organizations across the state. And so reach out to your supervisor or your state Idnr staff to see if there's already any memorandums of understanding or MOUs that they have with potential partners in your area. Maybe they've already got an MOU, which is kind of like a formal letter saying that we are going to share information and partner together. So there might already be MOUs out there about organizations in your area that you didn't know about. And so try to find those out so that you can know exactly who has worked with the program before. If there's an MOU, they're going to know what the migrant education program is. And so that's already, a door that is open for you to go in and continue and build up the partnership. When building relationships with these potential community partners, you also want to offer to provide in-person presentations to introduce the migrant education program to them and their staff. Photos and student success stories are really great tools for demonstrating the impact that the migrant education program has on students and for inspiring potential partnerships. You got to remember that as we are, as people, we oftentimes learn and sympathize with stories and photos. And so having those success stories, being able to see those photos goes a long way for convincing people to want to partner up with us, because they can really see the benefit that way. So if you have photos from like a summer camp, if you have photos from PAC meetings, any photos like that, they really might be able to help. But I want to stress, if you are sharing photos and success stories with outside organizations, with people in the community, make sure that you all have on file permission slips, written permission, photo, release forms from the people that are in those photos or from those students. If you're sharing success stories, I always recommend, share the success stories, but maybe change the names of the students, again, just to protect the privacy of our students as well. Realize too, many organizations, hold events or family nights where you can introduce program participants to the migrant education program. I was talking to a recruiter last week who said that they've had a ton of success recruiting by visiting like churches, like local churches who have, open houses or, fall festivals, and setting up a booth. So you can just bring a table that you can set up at any point in time, bring your brochures, your flyers, your business cards, any materials that you may have, set up your booth, introduce yourself to people that are coming by. Maybe you can bring some of those English books that you share out. Maybe you can bring some bandanas. Maybe if you all give school supplies, an example of the school supplies that you give out. Participating in these community events are great opportunities to meet new families, to network and gather information about what's going on in your community. Similarly, and reversely, you can invite outside organizations to actually come and attend your PAC meetings or any events that you all might have with families. Having partner organizations attend those PAC meetings is a terrific way, to help families enrolled in the migrant education program get connected to their larger communities, get further, other resources that they might need, and it helps build up that relationship with those organizations. We want to make sure that any partnership that we have, any organization that we have, is mutually beneficial for all parties involved. And so, we want to make sure that we are offering up things to outside organizations as well, and that we're not just taking. So in having them come, attend your PAC meetings, introduce themselves can go a long way with building up those relationships. Besides organizations working with migrant families or similar populations in your community, a large part of community recruitment is visiting locations where migrant workers, migrant students, and their families might frequent. And so we're talking about locations like restaurants where maybe workers go to eat after they finish with work. We're talking about stores where migrant workers might go to buy their groceries. We're talking about places where they might go to cash their checks. Laundromats are a great, great place for meeting people. So like I said, laundromats, churches, stores, popular restaurant, parks are a real big one, especially during summer months where migrant families might go to relax and have fun. Health clinics are huge. Soccer fields are terrific for recruiting specifically out of school youth and OSY. We have a lot of recruiters that go out, they know that a lot of the OSY in the area go to play soccer on Saturdays or Sundays. So on Saturdays or Sundays, they're out at the soccer fields ready to meet people. All of these can be great locations. And similarly, hang your flyers and posters catered to your audience in locations around your community to advertise the migrant education program and to raise awareness of the program. Leave those business cards and brochures so that people can take them home with them. As I mentioned, you want to make sure that your flyers, your brochures, any materials that you have to use to raise awareness of the migrant education program, to advertise the migrant education program, properly advertise the migrant education program's benefits and how it meets the needs of your community. You are going to know what your community needs so you can make any adjustments as needed. I encourage everybody to use canva.com. That's canva.com, which is a great free online tool that you can use to download your own flyer. As a free tool, it's incredibly powerful. A lot of the stuff that we've created through IDRC was created on canva.com. They also have a new feature where if you have a .edu address, you can actually get the pro version of Canva for free. And if you ever want to see some examples of some flyers, the IDRC website has flyers that you can download and use for free, highlighting the electronic survey tool on our electronic survey tool resource page. And so if you go to the electronic survey tool resource page, you're going to see here on the left where it says sample brochures. And so you can go click on the brochure. For example, this is the first example brochure for a school district. And you can download these, print them off, share them out with anybody that may need them. Remember that it is valuable to build up relationships with the owners and staffs of businesses or locations frequented by migrant families. These owners and staff can provide valuable information about your region, including letting you know when any new students or families have arrived. I found that a lot of times too, like those that run stores, that run businesses, they oftentimes are involved some in real estate. And so you might find that, the person that owns maybe the large Hispanic store in your community probably also has housing that they might rent out to migrant workers. And so it's great to build up those relationships so you can see, exactly how far their reach is and the different ways that y'all can work together. Remember that it takes time and patience to build relationships with businesses and organizations in your communities. You want to be persistent and be clear about what you're asking for. Be direct, being direct about stating about what you want works so much better. Visit any potential partners that you may have multiple times throughout the year to keep those relationships healthy and to maintain open communication. Don't only reach out to those community partners when you need them. Reach out, during the off season, check to see how they're doing, check regularly throughout the year, once a month or something like that, just to check to make sure and to keep those lines of communication open. As I mentioned, you always want to make sure that the potential partnerships are beneficial for both sides. Ask any potential partner, business, or organization what their needs are in the community and see how you and the migrant education program can help meet those needs. Be prepared to provide referrals for students in the program to those community partners when needed. So if you're working to collect, information about those different services that are offered, you can always send, students out there as a referral. Also, one of the other things that you can do is if those community partners or organizations that you're working with, if you feel comfortable with, if they have their own brochures or business cards, you can always hand them out as well to families in the community. So now that we've talked about the 4 key areas of identification and recruitment and provided tips for recruiting in each, let's talk about what you can actually do to go through and make sure that you are maintaining balance in your recruitment efforts. So to begin with, to help ensure that you are maintaining balance in your recruitment efforts, you should always create an IDNR plan for each day you are recruiting. So an IDNR plan allows you to lay all of your ideas out, see exactly what it is you want to accomplish, where you want to go, who you want to talk to. It allows you to remain organized so that you're not forgetting anything. You can divide your IDNR plan into the 4 key areas of IDNR. So you create your IDNR plan, you have a section titled In-School Recruitment, and in that section, you're going to list everything you want to do for that day related to recruiting in schools. So that could be following up on occupational surveys, talking to that Title I director, which is so important, talking to the superintendents. All of that can go under the in-school recruitment section of your IDNR plan. You can have another section of plan for agribusinesses and some farms to list all the farms that you want to visit, all the home visits. So maybe there's certain neighborhoods that you want to go to. Maybe there's certain families that you need to speak to. So those can go in the home visits. And lastly, you can have a section for community recruitment. And so for community recruitment, that could be organizations of the community that you want to work with. Maybe there's individual people within the community you want to work with. Maybe there's places you want to go to hang up posters or to hang up signs. All that can fall under community recruitment. So you're going to create your IDNR plan, have a document, divide it into 4 sections, 1 section each for each of the 4 key aspects of IDNR. And then you're going to list in those sections all the different places that you want to go to. Add to your IDNR plan the places that you want to visit and the people you want to speak with during the day. Make sure to add as much information as possible, like contact information and whatnot, addresses, and make sure that you are adding your locations or people to as many of the 4 key areas of IDNR as you possibly can. You want to try to always have those 4 key areas in your plan at all times. However, we know that depending on the time of year, maybe if it's during the summer month, you might not be able to have something in the school section. So you want to try to maintain that balance. When possible, have all 4 key areas represented. And then while you're creating your plan, you want to keep in mind as well the time of day that you would like to visit each location, so that you're making sure that you're visiting at an appropriate time when people are actually able to talk to you. For example, if we want to talk to the Title I director, we wouldn't schedule to talk to the Title I director at 8 o'clock at night because they're not going to be in their office. They're going to be at home resting. And so keep in mind the time of day you would like to visit each location and have that included on your plan as well. Make sure that you have enough planned on your IDNR plan to have a full day of recruiting, to have a full complete day. It's always best to overplan than underplan, because at least if you overplan, you can always come back and do that again the next day. I always encourage recruiters to add at least 4 to 5 extra locations or people to talk to as a backup plan in case your plans change, because we know that with IDNR, plans change all the time. We go to places, people aren't home, maybe businesses are closed, maybe people have moved. So we need to have backup ideas in case something changes. Also, once you finish your IDNR plan, you go out into the field and you come back. Don't throw your IDNR plan away. You want to keep your daily IDNR plans for a while. So when you can return from the field, you can review them and go back every 2 to 3 weeks. So when you're reviewing your IDNR plans, pay close attention to the types of locations you have visited. So if you broken it down into those 4 key areas of IDNR, you look and see it's like, okay, over the last 3 weeks, how many locations have I visited related to in-school recruitment? How many locations have I visited related to farms or agribusinesses? So breaking it down, going through and looking at seeing, you can actually tell how balanced you've been in your recruitment. And so you can see and identify if you're favoring one type of location over the other. And so if you're going through your plans over the last 3 weeks, count, and you can maybe see, oh, I've only visited half as many school locations as I have, community locations. So I should put more effort into recruiting into the school side of things. And so these are all different ways that you can use your plan to make sure that you're keeping balance. As I mentioned, if you notice you haven't been recruiting much in one of the key areas of IDNR, always take note and correct it. It's important to review and reflect on any work you might have done and to identify any areas where you can improve. I think one of the key things too here as well, if you notice that you're missing out on one of the key areas, or you're not visiting one of the key areas as much, ask yourself why that is. Try to figure out what it is about that key area that you might not favor as well, so that you can grow as a recruiter, so you can identify any potential issues and work on yourself to grow. If you notice that you are regularly missing one of the key areas of IDNR, create a goal to help you target and focus on that area. Goals are a terrific way of helping us stay, focused and helping us to keep that balance. Because if you set goals that you must keep, then you're going to work towards those goals. And so have goals related to maintaining balance, related to maintaining that you are recruiting in all those 4 key areas of IDNR. A good example of a goal would be if you notice that you have not been recruiting as much in schools, set your goal to speak to the Title I director and 4 principals in the school district over the next couple of weeks. So that gives you a clear idea of what you want to do to make sure that you are recruiting in all 4 key areas. Creating those goals around the 4 key areas is a great way to help you focus on maintaining balance in your recruitment efforts and improving the areas where you are not as strong. Like I mentioned, if you are noticing that you're regularly missing out on one of the 4 recruitment areas, if you are regularly not visiting as many farms as the other types of locations you have visited, it's a good chance for you to look and self-reflect and ask yourself, why am I not talking to as many farmers? Why am I not going to as many agribusiness as it could be? Is it something maybe you're not as comfortable with? Is it someplace that you can grow as a recruiter? And so it's a great way to be reflective as well, to see those areas of growth so that you can work to constantly improve. All right, well, we have gone for a little over an hour, and we really appreciate everybody being here. We've covered a lot of information and a lot of tips. We really appreciate it. We believe that balanced recruitment is so important. As we heard yesterday from Pat during our opening session, due to the pandemic, numbers were declining around the country. And although things are starting to pick back up, with a lot of states meeting their pre-pandemic numbers, it's important for us to extend our efforts in recruitment and to maintain balance so that we're being as thorough as possible. So I encourage you all to keep up, the balanced efforts, break it down yourselves as you leave here today. Write down a piece of paper, in-school recruitment, farm agribusiness recruitment, housing recruitment, community-based recruitment, and look and see okay, what are the things that I've done recently in recruitment, and try to divide it up into those 4 areas and see if maybe there is an area that you're not visiting or recruiting as much, so that you can identify that so you can work to improve it. Again, try to maintain balance at all times. Always try to recruit both agricultural and fishing work when possible, as well as seasonal and temporary work as possible. So now that as we're wrapping up, I ask for you all to complete. I would ask for you all to complete a quick survey letting us know how we're doing. The name of this presentation, the title is going to be Maintaining Balance. And so I shared the link to the SurveyMonkey training review form in chat for anybody, or if you want, you can use your phone, open up your camera on your phone to scan the QR code, and that'll take you straight to the training review form. As part of our federal requirements, we always ask for everybody to fill out the training review form to let us know how we're doing, We want to be able to provide the best possible training for everybody, as well as it gives you an opportunity in there. There's a section where you can let us know what kind of trainings you would like to see or you would like to receive. And so feel free to fill that out and let us know how we're doing so that we can constantly improve as well. Again, thank you all so much for joining us for the New Recruiter Bootcamp. We have one more session in 15 minutes, which is going to be our closing panel, where we're going to have a question and answer section with some experienced recruiters. But thank you all so much, and hope you all have a great rest of your day.